first, I would like to give you some perspectives from SciComm practice. Marcus, you already introduced me. So just to tell you, the Vetenskap och allmänhet, you pronounce that really well. It's a Swedish nonprofit. So we're promoting dialogue and openness between the researchers and the public. And of course, that can be done in many different ways. And then, as you heard, I'm also president. Actually, I succeeded Marcus Weisskopf as president. And you see it's a knowledge sharing platform, accelerator of innovation and excellence in science. And we are running quite a few European projects and also an annual conference, not as big as this one, but the European Science Engagement Conference, which you're very welcome to attend, happening early next year. So you already heard during the conference that there's an increased confidence, generally speaking, towards researchers, but might be a result of a pandemic when researchers have been very much in the limelight, in the TV studios, and we all realize how important science and research is for finding a cure and to find the right measures to fight the ongoing pandemic. And these are the latest results from our Swedish annual survey. We do an opinion poll to public attitudes towards science and scientists in Sweden. And we've done so since 2002, when we first were founded. And as you can see, there's quite a difference between the confidence in researchers working at universities, the black graph, if you contrast that with researchers working at companies, the green graph, the yellow graph. And I also put in some figures for science journalists, the green ones, and news journalists. And also you see that's a difference there. So increased interest, increased confidence in researchers and research during the pandemic. That's a trend in many countries. But when we also heard that there is an ongoing infodemic, the infodemic has come with a pandemic, leading to a lot of true and false claim, and it's difficult for people to know who to believe and how best to deal with the pandemic. But actually, I would argue that the infodemic started and preceded the pandemic by many years, and we've been discussing this, how best to fight and protect us from misinformation, disinformation. We've been talking about fact resistance and a lot of fake news. Now we have all those conspiracy theories related to the coronavirus and the vaccines. The big picture you see here is from the marches, one of the marches for science in Sweden, which took place in 2017. And you might recall when President Trump first took office, we had this discussion about the alternative facts he claimed when he said that there were many more people attending his inauguration compared to what was actually the facts. So we've been talking about the importance to ask for evidence. In Sweden, we had a campaign called Hur vet du det, which is how do you know that? So encouraging citizens to ask themselves, so is this really true? How can I check? To be critical, to check facts. And there's also lately quite a few debunking tips and advice. There's this excellent debunking handbook available in many different languages. So there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there, but there are also a lot of measures, and I think many of us are working with this, trying to prevent and counteract the infodemic. So I started to work with science communication at the end of at the turn of the millennium, Actually, as you heard, I used to work as a journalist, and when I went to university to study journalism, that was many years ago now, the teachers talked a lot about that there are senders and receivers, and as a journalist, you are transmitting messages through your reporting. So it's really one-way communication, and that was also the case when I first started in science communication, or actually as an information officer. So the deficit model is often referred to as this one-way of communicating research. And there was an underlying notion that if people just know a little bit more about science and research, they will also be more knowledgeable and have more positive attitudes towards science. We all know that facts are not enough. So increasingly, we're talking about that it must be two-way communication. You need to have dialogue between researchers and other parts of society. And there are a lot of interesting formats for doing so. But in recent years, we also talk a lot about that the sender and receiver, the two parties in a dialogue, also might do things together, find ways of collaborating. And citizen science is one of those ways of doing that. And increasingly, we are talking about open science, which is really an umbrella concept encompassing a lot of different things. You often think about open access, that the results should be openly available, accessible to all, and also increasingly about open data, that the underlying data should be openly available. But there are a lot of other things encompassed within open science, as you can see. And in 2016, there was this decision from all the EU member states that we should all work together towards a open science society. And I would argue that the pandemic has accelerated a lot, really, the activities and the measures to reach there. For instance, in European or EU policy, you know, we are now entering the Horizon Europe, the large research and innovation framework program. But already in the framework proceedings, the two frameworks preceding, there was requirements for open access, that the results from research projects should be openly available. In framework 7, there was also this specific work program for science in society, which I think many of us have benefited from. And during Horizon 2020, the program was essentially the same. It changed name to Science with and for Society. And now when entering Horizon Europe, there's not a specific work program, but instead there's a lot of different ways of interacting between researchers and other parts of society within the part that is called widening participation and strengthening the European research area. And it's also a lot about not only open science, but also specifically that citizens should be engaged and involved in research and innovation projects. So where is open science now in Horizon Europe? This is the structure of the new framework program. And I would argue that it's everywhere, that you are obliged, it's compulsory to publish openly, of course, open access. You should think of how best to present your data, that they should be as open as possible. It's not always possible, of course, because of integrity issues and ethical issues. The citizen engagements are within a lot of the different work programs. So there's really a lot of ways where you can engage citizens and different stakeholders in research and innovation. And I see also on the national level that it's coming more and more the notions of the importance of involving different stakeholders, involving the public in research and innovation. And I like the way of expressing what's public engagement all about, that is put together by the NCCP, the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement in the UK, that it's a lot of different ways, but the important with public engagement is that it is a two-way process. It's about interaction. You should not only talk, but also listening. So all parties involved have some benefits of it. And actually in Sweden, we recently had a national research bill, which was decided by the parliament, proposed by the government, decided by the parliament just recently, where they changed the Higher Education Act, so the law for the universities in Sweden, to stress the importance of researchers and research funding research performing organizations to interact in order to gain mutual benefits for both researchers and the other parts of society that they are interacting with. I think this is, of course, the UK is a lot ahead of us, but I can see in different European countries that there are similar policy notions now. So we are walking really towards an open science society. And also there's a lot of discussion about, it's not just about calling out to everyone that this is what we're doing as researchers, but it's a lot about that you tailor your communication and find different ways of interacting with different stakeholders, different target groups. We've been talking a lot for several years now about responsible research and innovation, which means that you should try to involve all parties that are affected in the research and innovation processes, so that the results coming out would be as usable and as sustainable as possible. Vetenskap och allmänhet, VA, was involved in a large European project called the RRI Tools project. And there's still a repository with a lot of different ways of interacting with different types of stakeholders to get them on board, to engage with them and involve them in research and innovation, which is still available and I think quite useful. Do you know this guy? This is actually a Swedish researcher who worked in the 18th century, so a long time ago. His name is Carl Linnaeus, and he was a botanist and also a physician. And he made the taxation, formed the system for herbs and plants, and systematized those. And he got a lot of samples coming in from lay people who found different interesting plants and sent them and gave it to him. So that, you could say, was an very early way of doing citizen science, where lay people were collaborating with a researcher. And we've seen that happen a lot more in recent years. And of course, smartphones and that you can connect them to the internet has made a huge difference. It's so much easier to get people involved in research. And we see a lot of organizations and a lot of initiatives for promoting citizen science. And we are working a lot with citizen science in Sweden, and VA is actually part of forming a national platform, both for interested citizens that would like to take part in research projects, but also for researchers to get advice on how best to set up citizen science projects. And that's not only happening in Sweden, but there's a European platform also taking place. It's already available. The EU Citizen Science Project has developed the EU Citizen Science platform, and there's quite a few new or recently established platforms for different parts of open science. And I would especially like to mention a platform that you see is developing, the European Science Engagement Platform, with a wealth of different formats and concepts, and also good reads for how to do public engagement and citizen involvement. So everything should be fine then. Well, not really, as when I listened to Mike Schaefer yesterday, I think I have a similar picture. I would like to share with you some results from a recent survey we made. It was in 2019. We asked researchers working at Swedish universities and university colleges about their views on communication and also open science in Sweden. Generally speaking, researchers are very, very positive towards communicating their research with other parts of society, as you can see. And the older you are, the more positive you get, which I thought was quite interesting. But we also found out, we had a qualitative pre-study where we interviewed a lot of researchers and found out common obstacles, barriers for communicating research. And the most common that researchers then picked when we asked about the barriers was that there are too many other tasks with a higher priority for them. As you can see, 2 out of 3 researchers said that that's the case, but also that there's a lack of allocated resources for doing communications work. So that's, of course, if you are not funding available, it's difficult to do this. What I was a bit surprised about was that there's quite a few found difficulties. Where could I go? How could I interact? How could I find the right opportunities, activities where I can interact and communicate? What was not so surprising was that it seems not to be too highly valued when it comes to both recruitment and in funding applications. So, and I know that this is the case not only in Sweden, but in many countries. There have been similar surveys made in other countries, and the results are very similar, I'm afraid. Also, we asked about if the researchers felt equipped to communicate their research. As you can see, men feel more equipped compared to women. About half of the researchers we talked to said that they were felt well, fairly well or completely well equipped. So just to come into an end, what can we foresee? And I see that there's a lot of interesting things going on, and a lot of science communication professionals are working with, as I talked about, debunking, fact-checking, but also during the pandemic, it's been important not only to talk about results, but also to explain the scientific process, to get involved with underserved audiences. That's always important, of course, but it's been really pinpointed during the pandemic. We're talking increasingly about place-based public engagement, work physically where the audience are situated, using empathy, storytelling. We talked about co-creation citizen science, guerrilla science, which is using scientific methods to try to make changes in society. Increasingly helping media out to do better science reporting, science and the arts, residencies, science galleries, focus on citizens science literacy, and also science capital, which are similar concepts, and increasingly about evidence-based practice and evidence-based research. So we should not only do this, but we should do this as in an evidence-based way. And what I can see coming up is that, at least in Sweden, we are trying to get education and training for PhD students to be compulsory. That's not the case yet, but there are measures now going on, led by the Swedish Research Councils, to get there and to get better national funding for science communication, because that's not very much the case in Sweden yet. I see also a lot of development of common infrastructures, platforms, collaborations, and conferences like the one we are attending now, where researchers and or SciComm practitioners are really interacting. And I think this is a great initiative. So thank you so much for your attention. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.